I called the alien queen my love as a joke, now she's declared me her mate for life. The translation error. Diplomatic linguist Octavia Reeves tucked a strand of her auburn hair behind her ear and triple-checked her translation matrices one final time. The holographic display pulsed with soft blue light as it processed the latest updates to the Crystallian lexicon. Working among the stars had been her dream since childhood, but nothing in her extensive training had prepared her for the Crystallians, a species whose language changed with the stellar cycles and whose very bodies resonated at frequencies that altered their speech patterns. Still obsessing over your translations? Diplomatic Officer Patel appeared in the doorway of her cramped office aboard the Galactic Coalition outpost Harmony Point. It's not obsession, it's thoroughness, Octavia replied without looking up. The Crystallian sovereign arrives in less than 3 hours, and their dialect shifts depending on the nearest star's magnetic resonance. I've been tracking the changes, but... She gestured at a particularly complex glyph hovering above her workstation. But? This modifier here changes the entire meaning of their formal greeting from, I acknowledge your presence with respect, to something much more intimate. Patel raised an eyebrow. How intimate are we talking? Somewhere between, I pledge my eternal devotion and our souls are now cosmically intertwined, Octavia said with a nervous laugh. No big deal. Perhaps stick with standard galactic common, then? Patel suggested. Octavia shook her head. The Crystallians consider it deeply respectful when other species attempt their language. It could make all the difference in these negotiations. The negotiations in question were perhaps the most critical in the Coalition's history. The Crystallians controlled access to rare minerals required for faster-than-light travel. Their civilization was ancient, predating human spaceflight by at least 50,000 years, and they rarely engaged with younger species, as they called them. 3 hours later, Octavia stood in the gleaming reception hall, her heart thundering against her ribcage as the airlock doors parted with a soft hiss. The Crystallian delegation floated in, literally floated, their translucent bodies hovering several inches above the polished floor. They moved with liquid grace, their bodies refracting the light like living prisms. At their center was Sovereign Xylith, leader of the 7 crystal systems and keeper of the ancient resonance codes. Unlike the others, whose bodies were clear as diamond, Xylith's form shimmered with an internal blue-violet light that pulsed in time with what Octavia assumed was their equivalent of a heartbeat. Distinguished guests, Coalition Ambassador Moreau began, we welcome you to Harmony Point Anne. Octavia stepped forward as rehearsed, raising her hand in the traditional Crystallian greeting gesture. She focused on the exact pronunciation she had practiced for weeks, carefully modulating her voice to hit the harmonic frequencies that gave Crystallian language its depth. Shilrathi Vas Karilia Mentar, she pronounced carefully, meaning to say, your presence honors our station. The room fell silent. The Crystallian attendants froze in place, their bodies suddenly refracting sharp prisms of light that danced across the walls. Sovereign Xylith drifted closer to Octavia, their crystalline form pulsing with increased intensity. When they spoke, their voice was like wind chimes in a storm, beautiful and somehow dangerous. You have spoken the binding words. Octavia blinked. I'm sorry. I meant to say that your presence honors us. What you said, one of the Crystallian translators clarified in perfect galactic common, was, I offer my essence to join with yours under the eternal stars. Ambassador Moreau turned slowly to Octavia, his face a mask of diplomatic composure that didn't quite hide his horror. Ms. Reeves, he said quietly, what exactly did you just say to the sovereign of the 7 crystal systems? Before she could answer, Sovereign Xylith extended a limb that morphed into something resembling a hand. Crystal filaments reached out and gently touched Octavia's forehead. A strange sensation washed over her, like being submerged in cool, sparkling water. The binding is acknowledged, Xylith announced, their voice resonating directly in Octavia's mind now. The human Octavia Reeves has initiated the sacred union. By our oldest laws, we are now joined as one essence across the stars. Octavia felt the blood drain from her face. I think, she whispered to no one in particular, I just accidentally proposed marriage to an alien sovereign. The Diplomatic Crisis Center of Harmony Point, normally reserved for interspecies conflicts or cosmic phenomena threats, had never been used for an accidental engagement. Yet here they were. Let me get this straight, Station Commander Ryusei said, pacing the length of the obsidian conference table. You propose to the leader of the most powerful non-humanoid civilization in this sector? Not intentionally, Octavia said, her hands wrapped around a mug of stimulant that was doing nothing to calm her nerves. The translation matrices must have missed the resonance shift caused by the nearby pulsar. What I thought was a formal greeting was apparently. She trailed off. A sacred bonding ritual, finished Ambassador Moreau, looking equal parts fascinated and appalled. According to the Crystallian cultural attaché, when Sovereign Xylith touched your forehead, they accepted the proposal. Can't we just explain it was a mistake? Octavia asked. A simple translation error? The door slid open, and Diplomatic Officer Patel entered with a Crystallian representative, not Xylith, but one of their advisors whose form shimmered with green-gold light. This is High Resonator Thilix, Patel introduced them. They've come to clarify the situation. Thilix's form rippled in what might have been the Crystallian equivalent of a bow. The sacred union is not entered into lightly, they said, their voice like distant bells. In our 5 million years of recorded history, only 17 non-crystallians have ever spoken the binding words. That you did so, using perfect resonance frequency, cannot be coincidence. But it was, Octavia insisted. I was trying to say. The words carry power beyond mere meaning, Thilix continued as if she hadn't spoken. They resonate at the quantum level, creating an actual bond between essence patterns, what you might call souls. Commander Ryusei cleared his throat. Are you suggesting that Ms. Reeves and Sovereign Xylith are now, what exactly? Bound, Thilix replied simply. They are now life resonance partners. The closest human concept would be spouses, though that term lacks the depth of the connection. Octavia felt dizzy. And this can't be undone? Surely there must be some kind of annulment process? The high resonator's form flickered, which Octavia had learned indicated strong emotion. To suggest breaking a sacred union there is no translation. It simply is not done. What exactly does this union entail? Ambassador Moreau asked carefully. Sovereign Xylith and Octavia Reeves will share essence patterns. Over time, they will develop telepathic resonance. They may experience each other's emotions, share dreams, and in rare cases, perceive through each other's senses. Octavia nearly spilled her drink. Telepathic what now? The practical implications, Thilix continued, are that Octavia Reeves now holds the status of sovereign consort of the 7 crystal systems. She will be expected to participate in certain ceremonial functions, reside part-time in the Crystal Palace of Xylithia, and may be called upon to represent Crystallian interests in coalition matters. The room fell silent again. Commander Ryusei looked like he might pass out. And if I refuse? Octavia finally asked. Thilix's crystalline body dimmed slightly. Refusal would be interpreted as a grave insult to not only Sovereign Xylith but to all Crystallians. The diplomatic consequences would be significant. Ambassador Moreau cleared his throat. The mineral rights negotiations would certainly fail, Thilix confirmed. And existing trade agreements would likely be severed. Great, Octavia thought. My translation error could collapse interstellar travel as we know it. How much time does Ms. Reeves have to consider her position? Patel asked diplomatically. Sovereign Xylith awaits her life resonance partner now, Thilix said, their tone suggesting the question was strange. The bonding ceremony must be completed within 1 stellar rotation of the initial declaration. That's less than 20 hours, Patel whispered. I need to speak with the Sovereign, Octavia said suddenly, standing up. Directly and privately. Thilix's form brightened. That would be appropriate. The life partners should commune before the ceremony. As Octavia followed the floating crystalline form from the crisis center, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished wall panel. She looked exactly like someone who had accidentally proposed to an alien sovereign, terrified, exhausted, and somehow slightly intrigued. Commander Ryusei called after her, "Reeves. Try not to accidentally adopt any alien children while you're at it." "Not helpful, sir," she called back, squaring her shoulders as she prepared to meet her apparent fiancé. The private observation deck reserved for distinguished visitors had been transformed. The normal lighting had been replaced with soft, pulsating illumination that mimicked the light patterns of the crystalline homeworld. As Octavia entered, she felt a strange humming in her bones, not unpleasant, but distinctly alien. Sovereign Xylith hovered in the center of the room, their crystalline form now radiating patterns of blue, violet, and a color Octavia couldn't quite name, something between silver and sound. "My life resonance partner," they said, their voice somehow both within the room and inside Octavia's mind. "You wish to speak with me?" Octavia took a deep breath. "Yes. There's been a misunderstanding. When I spoke the binding words, I didn't know what they meant. On Earth, my homeworld, we don't form lifelong bonds with a single phrase." Xylitha's form shifted, patterns of light moving within them like thoughts made visible. "You regret the binding." "I don't know you," she said simply. "And you don't know me. How can we be, whatever we are now?" "Knowledge comes after the binding, not before," Xylith replied. "This is the way it has always been for my kind." The words themselves carry the truth of compatibility, they cannot be spoken with perfect resonance unless the essences are harmonious. "But I just memorized the sounds. I practiced the pronunciation for weeks. Yet you achieved perfect resonance on the first attempt, matching your frequencies to mine." Xylith drifted closer. "Do you know the statistical probability of that occurring by chance?" Octavia shook her head. 1 in 7,426,000,000,000, Xylith stated. "Less likely than a star spontaneously changing its elemental composition." "So you're saying that what you call a mistake, we call destiny." Xylith extended a crystalline appendage, and this time, small tendrils of light reached out toward Octavia's hand. "May I?" Against her better judgment, Octavia nodded. When the light touched her skin, the sensation was electric, a tingling warmth that traveled up her arm and spread throughout her body. Suddenly, she could feel Xylith, not physically, but emotionally. Curiosity, ancient wisdom, and something surprisingly tender flowed between them. "Oh," she breathed. "This is merely the beginning of the bond," Xylith explained. "With time, our connection will deepen." Octavia carefully withdrew her hand, though the echo of the connection lingered. "This is a lot to process. On Earth, people generally date for years before making this kind of commitment." "Date?" Xylitha's form pulsed with question marks, literally, their body forming the shapes within their crystalline structure. "Get to know each other. Share experiences. Determine compatibility." "Fascinating," Xylith responded. "Your species leaves such important matters to chance and subjective assessment." Despite herself, Octavia smiled. "When you put it that way, it does sound a bit haphazard." "I propose a compromise," Xylith said after a moment of contemplation. "The bonding ceremony must proceed, our laws allow no exception. However, afterward, we could engage in this dating process. We could learn of each other while fulfilling the minimal ceremonial duties required of us." Octavia considered this. The diplomatic consequences of refusal would be catastrophic. And there was something about Xylith, a presence, a wisdom, perhaps even a kindness, that intrigued her. "If I agree to this arrangement," she said slowly, "I would need assurances that I can continue my work as a linguist. And I would need to know exactly what these ceremonial duties entail. Your work would be valued among my people, many of whom study the languages of younger species with great interest. Xylitha's form shifted into patterns that reminded Octavia of a smile. As for duties, they primarily involve attendance at seasonal resonance ceremonies and occasional diplomatic functions where the sovereign's life partner is traditionally present. Octavia took a deep breath. And if, after getting to know each other, we determine we're not compatible after all? That, Xylith admitted, would be unprecedented. But I am not without influence. Should that occur, we would find a solution that preserves both our dignities and the peace between our peoples. Against all logic and training, Octavia found herself nodding. Then I accept your compromise, Sovereign Xylith. In private, among life partners, I am simply Xylith, they corrected gently. Xylith, she repeated, the name feeling strange yet somehow right on her tongue. I think I just made first contact of an entirely new kind. Indeed, Xylith agreed, their form glowing with what might have been humor. Though I suspect neither of our civilizations included this scenario in their diplomatic protocols. For the first time since the whole ordeal began, Octavia laughed. Definitely not covered in my training manual. As she stood there, contemplating her new future with an alien being made of living crystal, Octavia couldn't help but think this might make for the most interesting linguistics paper ever written, assuming she survived the bonding ceremony. The Cosmic Courtship. The crystalline bonding ceremony was unlike anything Octavia could have imagined. The grand chamber aboard the crystalline diplomatic vessel pulsed with living light, every surface seeming to breathe in harmony. Crystallions of various hues and forms hovered in concentric circles around her and Xylith, their bodies chiming softly in what she now recognized as their native song speech. Octavia wore a ceremonial garment created specially for the occasion, a flowing dress embedded with tiny resonance crystals that responded to her heartbeat, shifting from deep blue to violet with each pulse. The dress had been a gift from Xylith, delivered with a note that simply read, "So you may speak in our way without words." "Are you ready, Octavia?" Commander Ryusei asked, standing beside her at the entrance to the inner circle. The coalition had decided that he, as the highest-ranking officer on Harmony Point, would serve as her ceremonial escort, a human tradition the Crystallians had graciously incorporated. Not remotely, she admitted, smoothing the crystalline fabric. But diplomatic necessity waits for no one. For what it's worth, Ryusei said quietly, you're handling this with remarkable grace. Most linguists would have had a complete breakdown by now. The day's still young, she replied with a nervous smile. The ceremony began with a resonance wave, a ripple of harmonic sound that passed through every being in the chamber, including Octavia. She felt it in her bones, a vibration that seemed to attune her body to some cosmic frequency. When it reached Xylith at the center of the room, their form expanded brilliantly, filling the chamber with prismatic light. Felix, serving as high resonator for the ceremony, guided Octavia through the chamber. The joining of essences requires physical connection, they explained. When you reach the sovereign, you must place your palms against their core form. Octavia nodded, her linguistic mind automatically cataloging every detail of the ceremony even as anxiety churned in her stomach. As she approached Xylith, she was struck again by their beauty, not human beauty, but something more fundamental, like the elegance of perfect mathematics or the harmony of the golden ratio. My life resonance partner, Xylith greeted her, their form reconfiguring to create a perfect impression of her silhouette within their crystalline body, a gesture she somehow understood was profoundly intimate. Following Felix's guidance, Octavia raised her hands and placed them against Xylith's core, where the light pulsed most intensely. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, not pain, but a rush of consciousness unlike anything she had experienced. Memories that weren't hers cascaded through her mind, the birth of stars viewed across millennia, the slow dance of planetary formation, the patient development of crystalline consciousness. She gasped as understanding flooded her. The Crystallians didn't merely observe time as humans did, they experienced it in multiple dimensions, perceiving past and future as malleable constructs rather than fixed points. And within that vast cosmic awareness, she felt Xylith's focused attention on her, curious, respectful, and carrying an emotion she could only describe as reverent wonder. When the connection broke, Octavia staggered slightly, steadied by Ryusiai's hand at her elbow. "It is complete," Felix announced. "The essences are harmonized." The assembled crystallians vibrated in what Octavia now understood was their equivalent of applause. Xylatha's form glowed with a warm golden light that somehow conveyed satisfaction and joy. That was. Octavia struggled for words, a rare predicament for a linguist. "The beginning," Xylath completed her thought. "And now, as promised, we shall engage in your human tradition of dating while fulfilling our ceremonial obligations." Commander Ryusiai leaned over. "Congratulations on your marriage, Linguist Reeves. I believe this makes you royalty now." "Temporary arrangement," she reminded him, though the lingering sensation of connection with Xylath made the words feel hollow. The first test of their unusual arrangement came 3 days later when a diplomatic reception was held for representatives from 17 coalition worlds. As sovereign consort, Octavia was expected to stand beside Xylath and participate in the complex greeting rituals each delegation required. "I can't possibly learn all these protocols in time," she had protested when Felix delivered her schedule. "You won't need to," Xylath assured her. "The bond will guide you." Octavia had been skeptical, but as each delegation approached, she found herself instinctively knowing when to bow, when to remain still, when to touch her forehead or extend her hands. More surprisingly, she found herself understanding languages she had never studied, as though the knowledge flowed directly from Xylatha's consciousness to hers. "This is," she whispered to Xylath between delegations. "Disorienting," they suggested, their crystalline form shimmering with patterns she now recognized as gentle amusement. "Incredible," she corrected. "Though slightly terrifying. How much of your knowledge can I access?" "The bond shares what is needed," Xylath explained. "Your mind draws what is relevant in the moment." Ambassador Moreau approached, looking both impressed and concerned. "You're performing admirably, Reeves." The Zendari ambassador was particularly charmed by your use of their ancestral greeting form. "Thank you, sir. There is, however, a small complication." Moreau lowered his voice. "The Coalition Council has questions about your new status. Specifically about your loyalties." Octavia froze. "My loyalties haven't changed. I'm still a Coalition citizen and diplomatic officer." "Yes, but you're also now consort to the ruler of an immensely powerful non-coalition civilization." Moreau glanced at Xylath, who had drifted slightly away to greet another dignitary. "The Council is concerned about potential conflicts of interest, access to classified information, that sort of thing." The implications hit her like a gravity surge. "They think I'm a security risk now." "Not exactly, but exactly," she finished, anger flaring. "I've served the Coalition faithfully for 8 years. One translation error doesn't change that." Moreau held up his hands. "I'm on your side, Reeves. But protocol requires a full security review. Until then, your Coalition clearance has been temporarily adjusted." "Suspended, you mean?" "Limited," he corrected diplomatically. "And you'll need to relocate from Harmony Point to the Crystallian vessel whenever it's in Coalition space." Octavia felt as though the deck had shifted beneath her feet. In one moment, she had lost her security clearance, her position, and her home. Across the room, Xylath suddenly turned, their form pulsing with sharp patterns. Through their connection, Octavia felt a wave of protective concern wash over her. Without a word being spoken, Xylath understood her distress. In 3 graceful movements, the sovereign was at her side. "Ambassador Moreau," they greeted, voice harmonizing at a frequency that commanded attention. "I sense my life partner is troubled by your words." Moreau shifted uncomfortably. "Standard security protocols, Sovereign. Nothing personal." "All matters concerning Octavia Reeves are personal to me," Xylith replied, their tone still melodious but carrying an unmistakable edge. As sovereign consort, she holds diplomatic immunity under both coalition and Crystallian law. Any limitation of her rights must be negotiated through proper channels. Octavia stared at Xylith, surprised by their swift intervention. Through their connection, she sensed not political calculation but genuine concern for her well-being. Of course, Sovereign, Moreau backpedaled. I was merely informing linguist Reeves of temporary measures while formal protocols are established. Those measures are premature, Xylith stated. Until formal diplomatic agreements are reached regarding the sovereign consort status, Octavia Reeves retains all previous rights and privileges. After Moreau retreated, Octavia turned to Xylith. Thank you for that, but I don't want to cause a diplomatic incident. Your distress constitutes a diplomatic incident, Xylith replied simply. The bond does not allow me to ignore it. This is all happening so fast, she admitted. Yesterday I was a linguist. Today I'm apparently a political chess piece. Xylith's form rippled thoughtfully. Chess, the strategy game with binary opposition and hierarchical pieces. An apt metaphor. They moved closer, lowering their voice to a resonance only she could hear. But remember, Octavia, in chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. Despite everything, she smiled. I'm going to need time to adjust to all this. Time, Xylith agreed, is something my people understand well. We have an expression, crystals form not in haste but in perfect patience. The weeks that followed were a crash course in interspecies diplomacy, Crystallian culture, and the strange intimacy of their growing bond. As promised, Xylith arranged for Octavia to continue her linguistic work, providing her with rare access to ancient Crystallian language archives, a treasure trove that would have made any xenolinguist weep with joy. They established a routine that allowed Octavia to split her time between the Crystallian vessel and her quarters on Harmony Point, which she had been allowed to keep after Xylith applied gentle but firm diplomatic pressure. The dating aspect of their arrangement progressed in ways both awkward and surprisingly sweet. Xylith was endlessly curious about human customs, requesting detailed explanations of everything from handshakes to the concept of dessert. Your species consumes food not for sustenance but for pleasure, they had asked during one of their cultural exchange sessions. Not exclusively for pleasure, Octavia explained, but yes, enjoyment is a big part of eating for humans. Fascinating. My people absorb energy directly from light and certain minerals. The concept of taste is unfamiliar to us. This had led to an impromptu demonstration where Octavia carefully placed a small piece of chocolate on what approximated Xylith's sensory membrane. The sovereign's entire form had momentarily changed color, vibrating at a frequency that shattered two nearby glasses. That was chaotic, they had finally said. But not unpleasant. I begin to understand why your species is so preoccupied with food. In return, Xylith shared Crystallian experiences, allowing Octavia to witness stellar phenomena through their unique perception, teaching her to feel the subtle vibrations of cosmic radiation that constantly bathed their vessel. During one such exchange, floating in a special chamber designed to amplify subtle energies, Octavia found herself laughing as Xylith attempted to teach her how to hear the magnetic field surrounding the nearby moon. I think this might be beyond human capability, she admitted after several failed attempts. Perhaps, Xylith acknowledged, their form hovering close to hers, but your willingness to try is meaningful. Through their connection, Octavia felt a wave of emotion from Xylith, something tender and appreciative that made her heart beat faster. Xylith, she asked suddenly, among your people, how common is it to form bonds with other species? The sovereign's light dimmed slightly. In our recorded history, only 17 such bonds have occurred. Of those, only 12 were considered successful. And the other 5? The non-Crystallian partners found the connection too overwhelming. They chose isolation or, in 2 cases, took their own lives. Octavia swallowed hard. That's not reassuring. Those cases occurred thousands of years ago, with species less adaptable than humans. Xylith moved closer, their light enveloping her like a gentle embrace. And none of those bonds were with me. The simple statement carried such conviction that Octavia couldn't help but smile. You're very confident for someone engaged in their first interspecies relationship. I have existed for over 3,000 of your years, Xylith reminded her. I have observed countless relationships across many species. The principles remain consistent: respect, communication, patience, and care. When you put it that way, it sounds almost simple. The best connections often are, Xylith replied, at their core. Not everyone approved of their unusual bond. 6 weeks after the bonding ceremony, Octavia received a secure transmission from Coalition headquarters. Admiral Vega, head of Coalition security, appeared on her screen looking severe. Linguist Reeves, she began without preamble, your situation has created significant security concerns at the highest levels. Admiral, Octavia acknowledged. I assume this isn't a social call. Hardly. The Coalition Council has been monitoring your relationship with Sovereign Xylith. There are concerns about information security, divided loyalties, and potential manipulation. Octavia bristled. With respect, Admiral, I've submitted to every security protocol required of me. My work continues to benefit Coalition interests, and I've provided more insight into Crystallian culture in 6 weeks than our diplomats gathered in 6 decades. No one questions your productivity, Reeves. But the bond you share with the Sovereign, our scientists don't fully understand it. Reports indicate possible telepathic connection, emotional influence, even shared consciousness. From a security perspective, this is deeply problematic. The bond doesn't work the way you think, Octavia explained. It's not mind control. It's more like heightened empathy, with occasional knowledge transfer. Admiral Vega leaned forward. That's precisely my concern. How can you be certain what information flows between you? How can you guarantee Coalition secrets aren't being unconsciously shared? The question struck Octavia silent. She couldn't guarantee that, and the realization was unsettling. Additionally, Vega continued, we've received intelligence that certain factions within Crystallian society oppose this union. The High Council of Resonators has voiced concerns about essence contamination and temporal distortion. Apparently, not all Crystallians are pleased with their Sovereign's new human partner. This was news to Octavia. Xylith had mentioned some traditional elements who were adjusting to the idea, but nothing about organized opposition. What exactly are you suggesting, Admiral? The Coalition Council is offering you an out, Reeves. Our scientists believe they might be able to sever the bond surgically. It would require specialized equipment and a carefully controlled environment, but... Stop. Octavia's voice was sharp. Are you suggesting brain surgery to end my relationship? To restore your autonomy and protect Coalition interests, yes. And has anyone bothered to ask if I want my autonomy restored? She demanded. Admiral Vega's expression softened slightly. Reeves, Octavia, we're concerned for you. This bond formed without your informed consent. You're essentially married to an alien being you barely knew. From our perspective, this looks dangerously close to coercion. Octavia took a deep breath, considering her next words carefully. I appreciate the concern, Admiral. Truly. But what began as an accident has become something else. Something valuable. I'm not being controlled or manipulated. If anything, this experience has given me greater insight and autonomy. You can't expect us to simply take your word for that. No, Octavia agreed. But you can respect my choice. The bond was accidental, staying in it is not. After the transmission ended, Octavia sat in silence, processing the implications. If the Coalition was this concerned, what was happening on the Crystallian side? She had sensed occasional discomfort from some of the elder resonators, but Xylith had never mentioned outright opposition. She found the sovereign in their private meditation chamber, their form unusually still, patterns moving slowly beneath their crystalline surface. "You're troubled," Xylith observed the moment she entered. "I just had an interesting conversation with Admiral Vega. She mentioned opposition to our bond among your people." Octavia crossed her arms. "Care to explain why I'm hearing this from Coalition intelligence rather than my life partner?" Xylith's form dimmed. "I did not wish to burden you with crystalline politics while you were adjusting to so many changes. That's not how partnerships work," she said firmly. "Human or crystalline." "You are correct." Xylith's form shifted, creating a space beside them that Octavia recognized as an invitation to sit. "The High Council of Resonators is concerned. A faction led by Elder Nilix believes that bonds with shorter-lived species create dangerous temporal distortions in our collective consciousness. Because I'll die long before you? Because grief changes us," Xylith said simply. "When a crystalline loses a bonded partner, the resonance patterns never fully recover. With our lifespans, carrying such grief for thousands of years can alter our fundamental frequency." Octavia felt a pang of sadness that wasn't entirely her own. "You'll outlive me by millennia." "Yes. And you knew this when you accepted the bond." "I did." "Why?" she asked, the question that had lingered since the beginning. "Why accept a bond that will bring you grief?" Xylith was silent for a long moment, their forms shifting through complex patterns of light. When they finally spoke, their voice resonated at a frequency that made Octavia's chest tighten with emotion. "Because in 3,000 years of existence, I had never encountered a mind that sang in harmony with mine. Until you spoke the binding words." The simple truth of it washed over her through their connection, Xylith's long solitude, the weight of leadership, and the unexpected joy of finding connection with someone who saw the universe differently. "That's..." Octavia swallowed hard. "That's quite a line." "It is not a line," Xylith responded, confusion coloring their tone. "It is truth." "I know," she said softly. "That's what makes it powerful." Xylith's form brightened. "The Coalition wishes to break our bond." "Yes. And the Crystalline Elders wish the same." "So it seems." "What do you wish, Octavia Reeves?" She reached out, placing her hand against Xylith's form, feeling the now familiar resonance between them. In the weeks since their bond had formed, she had gained access to knowledge no human had ever possessed, experienced sensations beyond normal human perception, and found herself changing in subtle ways, more patient, more attuned to the universe around her. But more than that, she had found herself genuinely drawn to Xylith's ancient wisdom, their curious perspective, and their surprising capacity for adaptation. "I wish," she said slowly, "that we had met under different circumstances. That we had chosen this connection rather than stumbling into it." She smiled. "But I don't wish to break it." Xylith's form glowed with such intensity that the room was momentarily bathed in prismatic light. Through their connection, Octavia felt relief, joy, and something deeper, an emotion that transcended simple translation. "Then we stand together," Xylith declared, "against both your coalition and my elders." That sounds like a diplomatic nightmare. Indeed. But as humans say, the course of true love never did run smooth. Octavia blinked. "Have you been studying Shakespeare?" "I have been studying all human concepts of bonding and partnership," Xylith admitted. "Your species has produced remarkable insights despite your brief existence." She laughed. "You really know how to compliment a girl." "I am learning," Xylith replied, their tone carrying what Octavia now recognized as playfulness. "After all, we have an entire human lifetime to perfect our courtship." "A lifetime," she agreed, the idea no longer seeming like a diplomatic sentence but a journey she was increasingly eager to take. "Though fair warning, humans can be quite stubborn. I might live to be 100 just to keep you on your toes." "I look forward to every moment," Xylith said, their form reconfiguring to create a perfect impression of her smile within their crystalline depths. Even the stubborn ones. As the crystalline vessel adjusted its orbit around Harmony Point, setting a course that would take them to the crystalline homeworld where they would face the Elder Council together, Octavia reflected on how thoroughly her life had changed because of one mistranslated phrase. Perhaps, she thought as Xylatha's consciousness brushed warmly against hers, some mistakes were meant to be made.